Welcome to today's episode of Awakening the Feminine Within, and we are really going to get into therapy. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about mainstream therapy and just why. Let's just dive into it, shall we? Because I really don't want, my intention is not to offend anybody in this episode, but also let's be real, because the reason why I'm talking about this topic today specifically is because I have had a multitude of specifically like, well, I've been in therapy for so long, or I've been doing therapy for this long, or why is it that I've been in therapy for X number of years and I still have this problem? Or, I haven't discussed this with my therapist, or, how come my therapist hasn't been able to come to these conclusions that you have? So we're going to get into the nitty gritty, because this is a really I think it's a genuine question that a lot of people have. And I'm not here to tell you what to do. Okay. Ultimately, you guys know this. You know that you're listening to this podcast because you want to hear information that is going to best benefit you in this journey of self-discovery and this journey to get a better life. That's ultimately why we're all here, right? We will all want to live better lives. So here's my theory as to why therapy is not serving people. And in my experience, and I'm not dissing my own therapist. I mean, I haven't talked to her in almost over a year now. And bless her, I absolutely love her. Shout out Mary if you're ever listening to this podcast. But I don't feel the need to talk with her anymore because I was like, I don't need to talk to her. I was getting more out of my own mentor, who's an energy healer, than I was, and I would get more from her. She was giving me more independent tools so that I didn't have to call her and I didn't have to even talk to her, my mentor. And I was like, I did therapy for, let's see. When did I start therapy? I started therapy with the therapist that I just referenced back in 2015. And actually, it might have been, I think it was the very, very beginning of 2016. So that's since last year, that was 2022, 4, 5, 6 years. So I communicated with her pretty consistently over the course of the time, moved to a different state, you name it, et cetera, et cetera. And so looking back at that 6-year journey, I have gotten more working with my mentor in 1 year than I did all of those 6 years combined. And you might be like, that's pretty big. And I've had the same, I've had clients who in one call, they're like, I have been trying to figure that out and I have seen therapists and have not reached this level of awareness and this level of problem solving that I have ever gotten with a therapist as I have with you in 1 to 2 calls. And I'm like, that's because the work is different. So from what I understand from the therapists that I've worked with and from the therapists that I've met and from hearing about the work that my clients do with therapists, and I'm using a general term here because there is 110% a time and a place for a therapist. I'm not going to tell you what that time and the place is because I'm talking within the context of people who are seeking healing, not necessarily people who are suffering from bipolar disorder or things like that. That's not my wheelhouse. So I want to make it very clear. I'm only talking in the context of if you don't have, I don't even want to use the word extreme because I don't like labels, but if you have some sort of condition that is outside the realm of, it does have a label, that's not what I'm referencing here. I'm referencing, this is in the context of if you're someone who is genuinely seeking healing, has frustration, and doesn't have, bipolar, split personality, things like that, then I feel like this conversation is relevant. So from what I understand of therapists is their goal is to have you come to the answers and the conclusions yourself with them guiding you and them prompting you. And for you to kind of get the words from inside to the outside, right? Because there is an energetic difference with that. I think I've talked about that before. And maybe if I haven't, when you keep an emotion inside of you and when you keep your thoughts inside of you and you don't get them outside your body, that can cause physical illness. It can cause so much fatigue, so much degeneration just from your body inside out. And it can be incredibly damaging. And so therapy is a really amazing tool in that sense because you are being forced to confront your thoughts, right? Forced to confront, in a lot of cases, your feelings because they come along with your thought process. So the differences that I'm seeing in my coaching clients in comparison to, what they're seeing with their therapists, and even my own experience of my own therapist that I had for a while, is that therapy takes a longer route to get to the root of the issue. And that's ultimately what I personally think it comes down to, is that therapy, it takes a longer pathway. Let's just use that analogy. It takes a longer path. Will you get there? A lot of people, they've spent 20, 25, 30 years in therapy, and they have to pursue other means of getting to their destination because they're like, it's just taking too long. I feel like I'm not satisfied with what I'm getting out of my therapy experience. And I have a lot of clients who come to me and they're like, well, I wish I had found you sooner, or I wish that I had known about this form of coaching or personal development sooner, because I would have saved myself a lot of money from X amount of years of therapy. And again, even for myself, I'm like, I will gladly give my mentor my money over a therapist because she gives me tools to be independent. And that is also what I do with my coaching clients, is like, let's give you the tools so that you can get to the issue before the issue becomes even a bigger issue in your life. Let's self-discover. And I'm talking about, my coaching clients in the realm of women specifically, because that is who I work with. So in my own experience with my therapist, when I worked with her, it just felt like maybe every 4 calls or maybe every 6 calls, then I would get a hit and I would get what we call like a download. And it would be like an eye-opening, like, oh my goodness, finally. Oh, I've, really nailed this on the head, or I've been waiting to discover that. But it wasn't in comparison to this feminine energy journey that I'm on. I have had more eye-opening moments that come to me on a weekly basis that, again, feel like it's like I'm downloading 30 years of eye-opening information in like the last year. Now, that can also be triggering for people, which is why this kind of personal development work and coaching has to be, and why coaches should be very careful with who they work with, because it can backfire. If your body is not able to handle the personal development and the level of transparency and vulnerability that you were aiming for, that ultimately you do want to experience with a therapist, but if your body is not ready for it, it can backfire and it can cause you more trauma. Now, in my realm and in my world, I don't take on clients that I know are not ready for that level of transparency and vulnerability. And there are clients that I've had worked with that, a while ago, maybe they took a little bit longer to get to their destination because they weren't quite ready. They hadn't done quite enough personal development work. So therapy is a great tool to gain self-awareness, because your therapist can bring things to your attention, hopefully, fingers crossed, if they're a good therapist, because good therapists are hard to find. And hopefully they're able to help you gain awareness about what your problem even is. Even if you find that they might not be helping you work through the problem, hopefully they've been able to help you at least see what the problem is, right? Because that can be, and that is what I help women with as well, is like, what is the actual problem here? Let's identify it. Let's recognize it for what it is, and let's bust through it, get to the root of that subconscious issue. So ultimately, my coaching style is intuitive. So when someone gets into my space, I can feel into what they're feeling. Now, I don't want you to feel like this is like a woo-woo thing, because if you're a woman, you know that you can sense someone's following you without even like looking. Like, that's what I'm talking about here in this sense, is an amplification of that intuitive sixth sense. So I can feel into women, and it's something that I've had to cultivate, and I can tap into someone. I mean, even my husband the other day, we were talking at nighttime, and I was like, oh, I know exactly what your problem is. And I was like, do you want to hear it? With my husband, it's a different situation because I have to be very careful not to emasculate him any further. And my role is not to coach him. So, I'm very delicate in this particular instance. And it's just crazy because all I had to do was focus on what he was thinking and feeling and what the issue was. And I knew exactly what the answer was. But of course, I asked him, do you want to hear this? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Because I do have this tool that I use heavily, and amazing. I'm so grateful that is so transformative with my clients. So the amazing thing is when a client gets into my space, within that first call, that first initial, point of contact that I have with them, within a couple of questions, I can identify what their issue is. And it's amazing because they'll be like, yeah, that literally summarizes my problem, my frustration, my fatigue, my issue that I've been trying to work through for the last 15 years. And they're like, how could you nail that in 20 to 30 minutes? And I'm like, well, I have an additional tool. It's not just simply that I'm, asking you questions and trying to figure out a solution. I can actually feel what you're feeling. And think of it, it's almost like an x-ray in some ways. That's the best way to explain it. And so it's great because I can give my clients a roadmap. We are starting here. This is what we're dealing with. This is the kind of vehicle we're driving. And this is what we need to fix along this pathway to get to your destination, which for the women that I'm working with, they want a better life. They want to experience their better life in the journey that we're actually working on, not wait till the very end. They want to get out of frustration. They want to start living. They want more clients. They want more money. They want all of these things. And so it's really beautiful to be able to help them, number one, just see right from the beginning. And ultimately, that's why, in my experience and from other women that I've talked to who have been coached by other people as a coach and client, have had a very similar experience. I got more out of this coaching than I did in therapy. And the goal is just different. I mean, with therapists, it's I know quite a few therapists, licensed therapists. I've had Dr. Ariane on this podcast. And it's funny because even she has gone into the coaching space because it's there are limitations and there are rules that they have through their practice, through the laws that are set for therapists. And I know that for at least the conversation that I've had with, the therapist that I talk to, it's there is more that is accessible in the coaching industry than there is traditionally with therapy. But again, always with a little, take this with a grain of salt, that little warning that if you're not ready for it, and if you don't work with a coach that can read in and knows and can identify their ideal client, it can backfire. And there are so many individuals, and I myself have had, 2 instances with coaches where I've had a not good experience because they unfortunately were not as well versed in their industries as they should have been. And they really just didn't know how to read, communicate with clients. And so it left with a unfortunate, ending to it. And so it really, I think, if you're over here and you're like, yeah, I've been in therapy, I've had a similar experience, and this is something that I want to look into because I feel like I'm not really getting my money's worth. And number 2, I've been doing this for how long? And it's just the math isn't mathing. You're not getting to your destination. You're not getting, it's not helping you in your day-to-day living like you thought it was going to. Then perhaps it is time to look for an alternate route. But it doesn't mean that you have to I would say if therapy is to some extent, even if it is minimally helping you, stick with it until you find something or someone that can give you a more direct path, and until you feel that pull towards I need to switch it up. I need to work with someone who's going to give me a more direct to the point answer and a quicker pace at which I would like to progress than I am already currently progressing with my therapist, or that you have progressed with a therapist in the past. So it's very much to each of their own. But I do think that, when someone comes into my space and I start coaching them, I'm like, okay, what is the goal, right? And I take that very seriously. But sometimes the goal can change because I can see things in your subconscious that you might not be aware of. And I'm like, oh, we got to actually work through this cobweb before we can go and start decorating the interior and start, really amplifying your life and bringing these amazing things into your life. We got to work through this cobweb first. We got to work through, this little kink here, this red tape. We got to work through this. And so the goal sometimes can shift, and that's okay. And women always are for example, I'm working with a client of mine now who she actually worked with me last year, and I was still fine tuning my coaching details then. And she worked with me for 4 months, and she ended up getting a divorce as a result of it. And she came back again this year because she's like, I want to fine tune the rest of my life, because we couldn't even target a lot of the things that she wanted to work on because there was so much friction in her day-to-day living with her ex at that point. And so the goal sometimes can shift, and that is totally okay. And you'll see it as we are working together, or as, you might be working with a coach. And it's so important that you are seeing development. That is like the number one thing. Like, you should be seeing progress within the first 4 weeks. If you're not seeing progress within the first 4 weeks, your coach is either not looking out for your best interests, or you're not ready for their particular coaching style. But either way, it's like, if my coaching clients are not seeing the results, I'm going to know it before they do. And it's kind of like, I like to think of it as like, I don't want to say, don't compare this 100%, but like, your mom is going to know that something's wrong. If you come home and she's like, how's your day? And you're like, oh, it's fine. And she's going to be like, was it though? Like, it's like when you're trying to lie to your parents and it doesn't work. That is how, like, I always know something, anything, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whatever, before my clients do. And it's an incredible tool, and it allows me to be in this space and to have the results that I have been having. But it is important. It is important to work with someone who is genuinely, and I mean genuinely, looking out for your best interest. And you can choose a therapist that way. If you're still like, yeah, I feel called to working with a therapist and I really feel like that's the path for me, just make sure that you are, again, seeing the signs, trying to look out for signs instead of just trying to patchwork, oh, I want to fix this problem and therefore I need a therapist. Like, be open. And because, even today in my Facebook group, someone had mentioned, like, I was explaining imposter syndrome, and I was like, oh, imposter syndrome, I went into my explanation and she was like, oh, I've never actually heard that before. And I'm like, it's just so interesting because I see all around me on social media, conversations from so many different kinds of coaches, which, there are a lot of coaches, and things about like, this is how you deal with imposter syndrome. This is how you deal with a lack of motivation. This is how you deal with, and I feel like I need to go whip out my LinkedIn in order to pull up all these examples. So I'm doing my best to remember them by heart. This is how you deal with a lack of accountability. And this is how you deal with, this is how you improve XYZ in this specific category. And what I find most difficult is that I'm like, you don't need motivation. You don't need accountability. You don't need, to me, those are all Band-Aids. You don't need a path out of imposter syndrome, or this is how you deal with imposter syndrome, because you shouldn't. If you really do the work and you do it correctly, you won't experience imposter syndrome. You won't experience this like, well, where's my motivation today? Shoot, what can I do about it? Like, you don't need accountability because there's this natural flow and natural push to just do what you want to do. And this is why, like, in my opinion, feminine energy does encompass everything. And in my opinion, and what I've seen in my own clients, gets clients to the solution more so than working with a therapist, because it does encompass everything and it gets to the root of the issue. Because in actuality, the reason that we experience frustration and, feeling out of alignment and just feeling disconnected from ourselves is because of something, a lack of self, a lack of knowledge of self, a lack of trauma caused us to separate from who we were and to push us away from being truly who we are. So many circumstances, everyone has had a situation where they're like, oh, I stopped being me. I stopped pursuing my interests because of this traumatic event that happened. And so ultimately, and this is why feminine energy is freaking amazing, is because it prompts you back to you. It leads you back to yourself, to be self-supportive, to be self-independent, to be everything. It gives you the self-confidence, and it gives you yourself back to you, which is ultimately, when we're going to therapy, we're like, oh, I'm dealing with, XYZ, frustration, and I don't want to be in this pain anymore. I don't want to experience this level of frustration or this level of pain anymore. So I'm really, really, really curious as to what your thoughts are. So come and join the Facebook group if you haven't already, because I want you to drop a note in there and just be like, tell me what your experience has been with therapy. Because again, a lot of the people that I know that are working with coaches, don't have therapists anymore. They like drop them because they're like, I don't really need it anymore. Or depending on the level of trauma, do both at the same time and make sure that they're like, almost always there's like a level of both. They're working with a therapist as well as working with someone who is in what we call, this kind of personal development space. And so my recommendation is, depending on your level of trauma, you got to tune into you and see what you need ultimately. And if you're someone who's like, yeah, I am frustrated, I don't like the progress, I'm not satisfied with the progress that I've received from my therapist, then I would say schedule a call with me. Let's talk about what it looks like to get intuitive coaching from a feminine energy perspective. Because the results, I have a lady who signed up for the early bird bonuses for Awaken Your Feminine Collective, which the doors close this week on Friday. And there's only a limit of 4 spots left. But she signed up and she's already having breakthroughs from tapping into this level of her intuition. And her first initial one-on-one call is tonight. And so it's so freaking amazing to be able to show women and to be able to give them the tools to start experiencing this 5-star living on a day-to-day. It is freaking mind-blowing. So if you are someone who's like, yep, I need to do something different, schedule a call with me. Check the link below if you're like, I think I need to do this group, this collective, Awaken Your Feminine Collective. It is think of it like one-on-one coaching in a very, very small group setting, and it's intimate for a reason because my clients get the best results with this one-to-one approach. And so it's freaking amazing. I can feel into you. I can tune into you. I can identify with what the pain points are, where we need to start working, and we start working on them right away. And I'm going to give you the tools. There's so many things that I built into my coaching. Even my client that came back to me after last year, she was like, whoa, there's access. There's not one bit of information that you ever have to worry about, like, oh, I have to take a note because I missed that. Everything's recorded, broken down, giving you a summary, giving you notes you get day-to-day coaching with me via Voxer, which is great because you get to implement. This is how I make sure that my clients get an incredible transformation because I check in with them. I'm like, okay, if you don't feel like you need to check in with me daily, you don't have to, but it's there for you if you need it, which is so important because this work and choosing to show up for you and choosing to, whether it's making changes in your calendar and to not work as much or to not hustle as much and delegating and getting things off your plate and asking for help, it is a day in and day out process. And think about the compound effect. That is how we get massive transformations because women are keeping the pressure on getting out of frustration, getting out of the pain points that they were currently living with. So we have payment plans. I have a 6-month payment plan for Awaken Your Feminine Collective. And like I said, once the doors close, you cannot join the group any further. So there is, of course, always one-on-one coaching. And if you have questions, schedule a call with me. I have availability between today and tomorrow. Today is Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. The doors close on Friday at midnight. And I want to hear from you. This podcast wasn't meant to be like a sales thing. Literally can't even tell you. I think the whole thing about therapists has come up like 4 times in the last 5 days. And I'm like, that's a sign. The universe wants me to talk about therapists and the difference and the relation of what it's like in comparison to coaching. And so if you have questions, I want to know about your experience with your therapist. Even if you are having an amazing experience, come and let us know on the Facebook group because I genuinely share that therapist information if they do online work. You know what I mean? It is so hard to come across good therapists, just like it is hard to come across really good and amazing coaches that genuinely are looking out for your best interest. So, and if you feel inspired and if you are feeling the pull towards joining the collective, please check out the link below. Send me a message. My DMs are open at all time. Even if you have a question about anything, message or pop into the Facebook group. I respond to almost every single comment there personally. So go check it out. Facebook.com/group/Awaken the Feminine Within. or just click the link below. It's in every single footer. So come and join the Facebook group and share this podcast with a friend. There are so many amazing podcasts coming up. It's funny because I said that I was going to go down to one podcast a week, but there's so many topics that keep coming up that I'm like, no, I don't think we're going to be, I think I'm going to be having to maintain the 2 podcasts a week because again, I run my business intuitively and I'm like, okay, I can sense that people need this information. So we're just gonna keep putting it out. So thank you so much for listening. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please leave us a review. It means so much for me to see those reviews. Truly, it impacts me so much. And please also share with a friend. It means the world to me. And I will see you and talk to you in the next podcast episode. Have a great day. Love you.